Hello and welcome to the 17th video on Aristotle's Poetics. This is about the third section, which is not named as I told it to be so in the introductory video, but the third section contains part 23 and part 24 of this book. So part 23 and 24, the explanation will be there in this video. 23, part 23, it's titled Epic Poetry Like Tragedy in Structure. And as we will have to note it down, these two chapters are actually allotted for the more of the discussion is on epic, and we have to take in mind this is not because of Aristotle's fondness, likeness for the particular literary type, but talking more about this, he will be again drawing us to what you call tragedy itself, or the merits of tragedy will be focused by the end of the discussions. So, epic poetry like tragedy in structure. How does it come? Let us see. Poetic imitation, narrative in form and in 1 meter. That is poetic imitation. Epic poetry, we know it is a kind of poetic imitation. And narrative in form and 1 meter. It almost always follows 1 meter. Necessary that, as in tragedies, plot be dramatically put together and dealt with one action that is whole, complete, and has a beginning, middle, and end. These features are almost the same as we come across a tragedy. But these are not put together like histories. Unlike histories, these are not put together like some chronological. See, in histories, histories deal not with one action but with a period, and we cannot focus on one human being or one person's exclusive life incidents. This is about a period, and the major incidents of the period we refer in histories. Of course, even at times we have some prominent figures. Just see, for example, sometimes we can talk about certain freedom fighters or some dictators, obviously attached with some historical time period. Still, the history as a whole talks about some period itself, and whatever happened from time to time to one or more men, no matter what relation the event has to one in an event has to another. That is, again, it is from time to time, not about one man but to many people, even the soldiers in general or the poor people in general. So during a pandemic time, if it is about a history of a pandemic time, that can talk about the people in general. So there is no focus upon one single human being. And then that is how Homer, and again at the end of that part 23, he mentions Homer's skill in Odyssey, Iliad, or his major classical works. That's all with that. Again, history, the comparison, and he wants to talk about history there to see how epic and tragedy are related. Even though tragedy is a kind of mixing or sticking together of incidents, history, it is not at all something like the way history deals with the events. And now we come across part 24 of Poetics text, that is epic tragedy, that differ in length, meter, the marvelous at the end. And let us see how the length of these two are different, or they differ, but we have already come across this discussion as part of tragedy and the major features, and how it cannot afford a length beyond a limit. That means a tragedy, and how that is in epic, how it can incorporate far beyond the, or comparatively far higher or incidents which are lengthy or minute details even can be incorporated. All these details we have come across, but here he allots a chapter almost that goes like a comparison. Now epic to either simple, complex, or ethical or pathetic. We have already divided tragedy and the types, the different tragic forms we have come across, tragic types of tragedy, and even epic also can be divided into such categories. But here parts are also of the same, like many of the parts which we elementary parts themselves, that plot, character, thought, all these are the major elementary, we know which are the 6 elementary parts of a tragedy. Here it is, except epic does not have melody and spectacle. That is it. That epic can never have spectacle, and melody also is not, because that is already going in a narrative form, and there is no possibility for us to have a song or melodic structure, melody getting taken into. Now, epic requires peripetia recognition, scenes of suffering, thought, diction. So, these are all common to both tragedy and epic. But where it differs in the mode of its part, it is melody and spectacle we can now see in that epic form. And epic differs from tragedy in the length of composition. That is the major point of argument here. The length of the composition and in the meter. That is a good limit of length to take the beginning and end in one view. We always try to do, or we try to observe, or Aristotle at least wants every tragedy playwrights to follow that. But here epic, of course, we know it has much, it can afford any length because it's a long narrative form. But here now Aristotle tells that nowadays, or even his time, he tells that nowadays some epics of not that lengthy epics, that is shorter epics also come, but every time its subject matter must be of the serious kind and is focusing on one hero, the life of the hero, that's all. And with respect to its extending length, the epic has a capacity wholly peculiar to itself, because the narrative of tragedy does not admit of the imitation of many parts of an action that occur at the same time, but only of one part imitated on the stage by the actors. So this is a very keen and very clear explanation that we have already come across in relation with the length that a tragedy or any performance on stage that can afford. In the epic, however, because of its narrative form, many parts that happen at some same time can be included. By these, if they are closely connected with the rest, the majesty of the poem is increased. And even when it is having a length beyond a limit, that is at an easily and comprehensible length, even if it exceeds that limit, still that can even at that point it can be made somewhat elegant, or the majesty can be at peak when if the writer is skillful in connecting and weaving all those incidents together in a better manner. And hence the epic has this advantage tending to magnificence of effect, variety of or the hearer, and the weaving of dissimilar episodes into action. So that is possible only for a skillful writer. For uniformity quickly satiates an audience and makes tragedies fail on the stage. See, for uniformity and episode into action, again weaving of dissimilar episodes into action, that can be attempted by a very skillful writer. For uniformity quickly satiates an audience and makes tragedies fail on stage, but the same uniformity will fail a tragedy on the stage. But uniformity and consistency is not preferred, especially in a visual art. See, that's why he tells, even when it can bring a marvelous beauty to a an epic, but that the same thing will bring only disgust in the audience of a tragedy. Now he talks about meter, the heroic meter, most stately and weighty, and most readily receives rare words and metaphors and ornaments. So we know these are some of the features of language, those are preferred by any of these kinds of serious writings, or somewhat any topics that deal with any kind of narration that deals with some serious topic, serious themes. So these rare words and all can be easily taken by or readily received by the kind of meter called heroic. And also see, iambic is somewhere preferable by action, the narrations on action, and tetrameter for dance, that meter of activity, that is a meter of activity. And we know how dance takes rhythm and bodily movements to these are the main points with the dance. And then these meters that are really matching with the requirement of that particular act are to be selected. Otherwise, this is about making things worse, and it would be more absurd if one mixes them all together. That also should not happen. See, we know how to make use of the such and such meters, different meters, but to make use of those in the single kind of a writing or a particular structure writing type, that also will not be better. That will also bring a negative effect. And Homer's method is necessary for the poet to speak in his own person as little as possible, because he is not an imitator in what he says then. See, that is the point. To limit the narrative, the introduction or interruption on the part of the writer as a narrator, because he doesn't have much to do anything on stage. And Homer, of course, we know he is known for his epics themselves, but he is praised at different points of poetics. Homer, having said a few words in introduction, straightway brings forward a man or woman or some other agent, each of them with a character of his own. That is it. So we know how different the structure, the tragedy as a literary type, how it evolved. It was taken as developmental stages of tragedy. The reason is, this is the way they brought the development, the changes. That is, first it was about one character, then they tried with the two characters, and some other main writers tried with the three characters, diminished the choral position, choral role. So this is the same way here he talks about the kind of how he tried to avoid the role of a narrator on behalf of the writer, because he doesn't have anything to do with the action. So immediately he introduces a skillful writer, especially he talks about Homer here, introduces some characters, a man or woman who come on stage. They come on stage and they talk on behalf of their roles, so that this will be really something better and readily acceptable for the audience. Otherwise, this is about some person telling you a story, but here the audience come and watch. They want to watch a play and they want to have the visual pleasure there. And some poets, sometimes throughout we see in some cases their imitations are few and far between. That is, sometimes they interrupt. Some of them talk for the whole time or majority of the time, and action is comparatively cut short. That also will not help. And it is also necessary for the poet to put into his tragedy something astonishing, but the improbable, which is most usual basis for the astonishing, is better employed in epic than in tragedy. That is another thing, astonishing, to bring something astonishing, that also has the same effect of a twist we see and we appreciate. But the problem is, it is better employed in an epic when you have to you have to introduce something improbable that can be there in an epic, and that may be accepted because the actor is not seen. We may think that sometimes we talk about we have the concept of willing suspension of disbelief. So when you read about that, it is just as it is narrated in a literary form, in an epic. When you have a narration on a very unnatural strength of a hero or adventures of a hero, you are likely to accept that intact without much of an objection. But when it is portrayed on the stage, we even have the tendency to say that, oh, this will never happen. When sometimes there are over projections of some heroes, like they are flying and hitting the villains. So when we have the visual pictures available, visually when we have the images available, we have the tendency to resist that acceptance, so that he talks about. So we always have this, oh, this is something over projection of the hero, and this is something, this will never happen. See, we might have come across scenes where the hero is almost at the verge of death, after being hit by many villains, but once the heroine calls the name, or some other because of some other intuitions, the person wakes all of a sudden and he begins hitting like a robot and all others fall. See, these scenes, we have a tendency, otherwise we should be persons who are fond of, go for watching these movies or any other visual media just for the sake of these wrestling scenes and the stunt scenes. But otherwise, we all have this tendency, and that's the same point at which Aristotle tells that epic, in a reading, this tendency to resist is even lesser. And in a tragedy, because the actor is not seen in the epic, the laughable qualities escape notice. That is it. Sometimes it is laughable. Oh, how does it happen? There is not even a 10% chance for this to happen. That hero, even he is a human being like us. So already that is the rule, that anyway we have to portray some a very ordinary human being. That is a character of some some unnatural. See, unnatural human beings are not taken even in a tragedy, but even then it should be a person who stands in between an ordinary. We have to identify with the person, and at every point, if we can identify with the person in a scene which projects unlikely, improbable things there, and then we lost the interest. Here, the astonishing is pleasing. A proof of this is that all men in telling stories add to them in the belief they will please their audience. That is again one other feature of human beings, to have the pleasure out of something astonishing, even though it is something beyond our reasoning, or even if it is arresting our reason. We have to arrest our reason with that much difficulty at times. We have a fondness for this astonishing features, astonishing narrations. And Homer, there is a reference that Homer is influential in teaching other poets how lies should be told. That is, again, improbable, impossible things when narrated with this much authenticity. It is again about a mode of telling, how you can tell lies with this much ease, or how you have to tell the lies, how you have to make them believe the lies. Now, using paralogism, one thing is about paralogism, that is, exist, true, false, that is false conclusion. And even if it is a false conclusion, that there are skillful poets who can make the audience feel comfortable even at that juncture. And that is the skill of the person. Otherwise, if the narration is not arresting, if the narration is not somewhat claiming your interest, your fascination, then you have the tendency to resist. The audience, of course, we show the tendency to resist all that, and we start blaming the narrations, the characters, the features, all those. And now the poet should choose probable impossibilities rather than improbable possibilities. That's why Aristotle, by the end of the session, he wants to tell poets should be careful enough to choose probable impossibilities. Please note down the term probable impossibilities. At least there is a minor chance for that to take place, but maybe an impossibility, but still, rather than improbable possibilities, rather than improbable, even somewhere we feel that okay, possible, but there is of course the utmost arresting of the reason at that point, and again that improbable something, and then even if it is a possibility, we do not want to accept that. And the tragic plot should not be made upon irrational parts. That's why Aristotle tells the tragic plot should not be made upon irrational parts. If the unreasonable cannot be avoided, it should be outside the plot. At least if you have to add something irrational, that is the main thing. With improbable possibilities, we can, if you want, we can match with the irrational parts. And even if you want to add such unreasonable themes and all in your plot writing, in your tragic composition, in your writing, then at least keep it away from the main plot. At least to bring something in that, you have to make the plot safe first, that is to form the plot to keep it in a better position, and then add something if you want here and there. Of course, sometimes even we see some of the movies here nowadays, and some songs and all, those are placed out of context. We feel at times, we feel like, why this song is placed there? We do not have an answer. And again, still that doesn't affect the whole at times we feel like, okay, that is a kind of relaxation in between. If these unreasonable parts are incorporated into the whole structure, that is fine, affordable, but it should not in any way affect the standard of the plot in general. And a diction that is too splendid conceals both character and thought. And again, one more thing he tells, a diction that is too splendid. Diction also, Aristotle tells how it should be embellished, but only at where the parts which demand the usage. Otherwise, embellishing everywhere, whenever and wherever it is not necessary, that also will be concealing. That's concealing the character and thought, because we feel like the character is talking here and there, whatever, something something which we cannot connect at all, and of course the character we are estranged with, and we do not feel anything for them. And then the whole of the tragedy, or whole of the aim of the tragedy, again the main thing, that is the evoking of the pity and fear out of the tragic error we witness on stage, the whole tragic doom the main hero has to undergo. All this effect will be at stake, and that's why Aristotle talks about keeping a proper balance in every part. Now we have seen, even though the discussions started with the epic, he very smoothly shifts to tragedy again. So that is the way this whole text is, we can say without having any doubt, it is wholly almost devoted upon tragedy as a literary type. So that's all with the part 3 of Poetics text, and part 24 section 3 of text of the text, and part 24 is the final part in that section, and this comes to an end. Next we will be discussing the fourth section. Next video will talk about the fourth section of the same text. Thank you.